Have you ever felt like you're stuck in a version of yourself that just doesn't serve you anymore? Like you're holding on to habits, thoughts, and patterns that are keeping you from the person you're meant to be? What if I told you that to move forward, you need to kill your current self? Not in a destructive way, but in a way that allows you to rise stronger, just like a phoenix. Part 1. The struggle with the old self. Let's talk about Gohan. He's just like many of us, someone who's been stuck in the same patterns for years. Every day feels like a repeat of the last. He knows something's off, but he can't quite put his finger on it. He's been trying to break free, to grow into something better, but every time he takes a step forward, he feels like he's pulled right back into the same old routines. Gohan keeps making the same mistakes, falling into the same habits, and wondering why life isn't changing. It's like he's living on autopilot. Maybe you can relate to Gohan. Maybe you're stuck in a cycle of habits and thoughts that once served you but are now holding you back. And that's the thing about our old self. It's not necessarily bad. In fact, it might have gotten you through tough times or helped you succeed in the past. But there comes a point when the version of yourself that got you here is no longer the version that can take you forward. It keeps you comfortable, but not fulfilled. Musashi said, "Think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world." And that's what Gohan's missing. He's holding on too tightly to his current self, thinking that's all he can be. But the truth is, to grow, we have to be willing to let go of who we are now. The habits that feel familiar but keep us from taking risks. The thoughts that convince us we can't do better. The patterns that hold us back. We all have an old self, the version of us that served a purpose up to now. But now it's time to move on. And just like Gohan, you might feel stuck, not knowing how to let go. But here's the thing. Transformation requires you to face the truth about your current self and accept that the person you are today isn't the person you need to be tomorrow. But before Gohan can rise as someone new, he has to confront the uncomfortable truth about his current self. That's where the process of burning down the old begins. Part 2. Burning down the old. Now, Gohan's finally come to a realization. He needs to change. He's recognized that the habits, the mindset, and the version of himself he's been holding on to are keeping him stuck. But realizing the need for change is one thing. Letting go of that old self is something entirely different. It's uncomfortable. It's painful. And for Gohan, it feels like he's standing at the edge of a cliff, terrified of what will happen if he lets go. Letting go of the old version of yourself isn't easy. It's scary to think about burning away the parts of you that you've held on to for so long. The parts that have kept you safe, that feel familiar. But if Gohan wants to transform, this is where the process begins. It's not about making small adjustments. It's about burning away the parts of himself that are holding him back. This is where Musashi's Dokkodo comes in. Musashi taught detachment, not just from material possessions, but from the identity we cling to. For Gohan and for you, it means letting go of the limitations, fears, and beliefs that have defined who you are up to this point. You have to detach from the version of yourself that you've built, the one that tells you, "This is all I can be." It's not just about giving up bad habits, it's about unlearning the things you've always believed about yourself that no longer serve you. For Gohan, this means shedding the old skin that's become too tight, too restrictive. It's uncomfortable because he's been living in that skin for so long that it's hard to imagine life without it. But this is the key. Before you can become someone new, you must let the old version of you fall apart. Imagine the phoenix rising from the ashes. Before it can be reborn, it must burn. And that's what Gohan is doing, burning down the old self. It's not a pleasant process, but it's necessary. The fears that have kept him from stepping forward, the limitations that have made him think small, all of that has to go. Only then can the transformation begin. Once Gohan has burned down the old, what remains? Ashes. But in those ashes, he'll find the spark that will allow him to rebuild himself, stronger and more intentional than before. Part 3. Finding the Ashes. Now, Gohan has burned down his old self. Everything he once thought defined him, his habits, his mindset, his old patterns, is gone. He's at rock bottom, and it feels like chaos. There's nothing left to hold on to. But it's in this moment of stillness, in the ashes of what he once was, that the real transformation begins. Because in these ashes, Gohan is free. Free from the constraints of who he thought he was supposed to be. It's tempting to rush through this stage, to try to rebuild yourself as fast as possible. But true transformation requires stillness, sitting in that empty space where everything feels stripped away. It's uncomfortable, but it's also where the magic happens. It's in this stillness that you start to rediscover who you really are, and more importantly, who you want to be. Carl Jung often spoke about the shadow, the parts of ourselves we hide, the things we don't want to confront. When you've burned away the old version of yourself, the shadow surfaces. And it's not something to be feared. It's something to be integrated. This is the moment where you acknowledge the things about yourself you've been avoiding, the fears, the doubts, the insecurities. But instead of pushing them away, you use them to fuel your next steps. This is where Gohan begins to shift. He realizes he doesn't have to completely reinvent himself. He doesn't need to become someone entirely new. What he's doing is rebuilding, taking the best parts of himself and letting go of the rest. The old self had its purpose, but now he's ready to create something stronger, something more aligned with his true potential. The stillness is the turning point. It's where Gohan and you stop letting the old story define what's possible. It's where you find clarity, focus, and direction for the person you're becoming. The shadow doesn't control you, it empowers you. And now, in the ashes, Gohan has the spark to rebuild. But how do you ensure that what you're building will truly last? Part 4. Rebuilding with intention. Now that Gohan is standing in the ashes of his former self, he's ready to rebuild. But this time, it's different. He's not rushing back to who he used to be or falling into old habits. This time, Gohan is rebuilding with intention. Every piece of the person he's becoming is chosen carefully. He's not just adding back what's familiar. He's creating something stronger, something that's truly aligned with who he wants to be. Rebirth isn't just about wiping the slate clean, it's about rebuilding with purpose. This is where many people stumble. After tearing down the old self, they slip back into the same patterns they were trying to escape. It's easy to fall into the comfort of what's familiar. But if you want real transformation, you have to be intentional about what you bring into your new life. James Clear talks about this in Atomic Habits. He explains that small, deliberate changes, when done consistently, lead to long-lasting transformation. Gohan starts small, thinking about what habits, thoughts, and practices are truly serving him. He doesn't try to overhaul his entire life overnight. Instead, he asks himself, what do I want to keep from my old self? What do I want to let go of? And that's the key. Rebuilding isn't about becoming someone completely different. It's about refining who you are. It's about getting rid of the habits and mindsets that held you back and intentionally choosing new ones that align with your values and goals. Gohan knows that if he doesn't choose carefully, he'll just end up becoming a slightly different version of his old self, trapped in the same cycle. He starts by focusing on small, actionable changes. Maybe it's waking up 30 minutes earlier to reflect on his goals. Maybe it's cutting out distractions that keep him from being productive. These small steps, though they may seem insignificant at first, compound over time. And with every intentional choice, Gohan is becoming more aligned with the vision he has for his life. Rebuilding with intention means taking control of your future. It's about deciding what kind of person you want to be and then choosing the habits, routines, and mindset that will get you there. Gohan understands that this isn't a quick fix. It's a gradual process. But with each step, he's building a version of himself that's stronger, more focused, and more aligned with his true potential. But even as Gohan rebuilds himself, he knows that the process doesn't stop here. Rebirth isn't a one-time event, it's a cycle. Continuous growth is what keeps him evolving. Part 5. The Cycle of Rebirth. Gohan has risen from the ashes. He's shed his old self, faced the stillness, and rebuilt with intention. But here's the truth. His journey isn't over. Transformation isn't a one-time thing. Just as the phoenix is reborn again and again, Gohan knows that his growth is a cycle. It's a process he will repeat, not just once, but many times throughout his life. Musashi understood this well. He believed that mastery wasn't a destination. It was a journey that required constant learning and evolving. Musashi never stopped growing. Even at the height of his skills, he continued to refine his craft, to study, to improve. And that's what Gohan realizes now. The version of himself he's built today might serve him well for a while, but eventually, he'll have to shed it too. The Phoenix method teaches us that rebirth isn't the end. It's the beginning of the next phase. Life will keep changing, and so will Gohan's challenges. As he moves forward, there will be new habits to break, new mindsets to adopt, and new versions of himself to become. This cycle of death and rebirth is essential for continuous growth. The person you are today may not be enough to handle the challenges you'll face tomorrow, and that's okay. It's part of the process. The key here is resilience. Gohan knows that life will knock him down again at some point. He might face setbacks, failures, or moments of doubt, but he's no longer afraid of falling apart. He understands that falling apart is just part of the transformation. Each time he rises, he becomes stronger, more focused, and more aligned with his purpose. This is the Phoenix method in action. Rise, evolve, and rise again. Just like the Phoenix, Gohan will continue to burn away parts of himself that no longer serve him, over and over throughout his life. And this isn't a weakness. It's the source of his strength. Every time he sheds an old layer, he grows stronger. Every time he falls and gets back up, he rises higher. The real power of this method is in embracing the cycle. You don't just kill your current self once. You do it again and again as you grow, as you face new challenges, and as you step into bigger, more meaningful versions of your life. And that's the beauty of continuous growth. It's never ending. You're never done becoming who you're meant to be. Now that Gohan has learned to rise from the ashes, it's time for you to put the Phoenix method into action. So what will you let go of today? What parts of your current self need to burn away so you can rise stronger? If this video resonated with you, hit that subscribe button and stick around for more content on transformation, personal growth, and mastering the art of self-improvement.